Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Sophia and welcome to episode 3 of the Annotations podcast. I am currently in the process of writing my debut novel. For the purpose of discussing it with you guys, I am currently calling it Project Heat. It is a frenemies to lovers rom-com with just the most amazing vibes and all of your favorite tropes. I have set a goal for myself to finish the full first draft of this book by April 1st. It is March 4th, the day that I'm literally recording and uploading this podcast, and we are maybe like a third of the way there. I'm definitely super behind. However, like I said, it's been a chaotic couple of weeks, and I also had to kind of go back to the drawing board with a lot of planning and outlining during that time. So I feel prepared and ready to go. And I also have a lot of dedicated time through this entire month to write, including a at-home writing retreat that I have scheduled for myself later in the month, which I will definitely be making a video about and talking more about later. But if you're interested in following along on my journey, please be sure to subscribe. Most of you watching are not subscribed. It would mean a lot as a small creator and aspiring writer if you could hit the subscribe button. So getting back into the topic of today's episode, which is getting out of a creative rut, creativity is a muscle. If you are not actively being creative and using that muscle, it's gonna weaken over time. And as a forever victim of imposter syndrome, I have definitely had more than a few times throughout my life, my career, the journey of my personal passions, where I have just felt like I'm simply not a creative person, so to say, which is literally a lie. In my opinion, there is no such thing as a creative person. I think there's definitely people who may be more talented than others at certain things, but creativity is something that you work on and work for, and it's just not something that you're born with. And I feel like if you are in a creative rut, the number one thing that you can do, no matter what the thing that you're working on is, whether it's content creation, writing a book, something creative in your job, whatever it is, the most important thing that you can do is continue to build momentum and consistency. And this is something that I didn't really make the connection about in terms of creativity up until honestly the last couple of months. As you guys know, I am also a social media manager. So in the world of marketing, creativity is also a massive part of my job. And being a strategist specifically, there's a lot of creativity that comes into play with that when I'm creating strategies for my clients or creating content for my clients. It's a very creative field and I love it. But I think over the years, I started to get really burnt out from that being my job. And so over the course of the last 2 years, all of the times that I have tried to take up my own content creation, I immediately got burned out because I was like basically overworking my creative muscle. And so I think there's something to be said about creating a balance when it comes to creativity. If creativity is something that you need to use during work and something that you use in your passion project, which I'm sure it most likely is, it takes work and time and dedication to find out what works for you in terms of avoiding that burnout. And I wish I could sit here and give you like hardcore advice of do this, do that, and then this problem will be solved for you, but that's just not how it works. Creativity is just something that varies from person to person, and some people can just turn it on like a light switch and others just can't. I don't feel like I'm somebody who can just turn on my creativity out of the blue, and I think that's why the way that I write is the way that I write. Like, for example, if I sit down at a scheduled time and I'm forcing myself to try to write my book, most of the time I'm like not really gonna make much progress because I'm not feeling it. I'm not feeling creative. I'm not feeling ready to write and ready to work on this thing. Whereas when I had a conventional 9 to 5 job and I needed to use a lot of creativity during my job, I had to force myself to turn that on and find a way to make it work during the day. And so I think as you continue to build momentum in everything that you do and maintain consistency in everything that you do and every area that you're using creativity, you will eventually start to find out what does and doesn't work for you. And I think that is one of the most important pieces of advice that I can give about getting out of creative rut, is to just continue building that momentum even when you're stuck and even when you feel like you can't break out of it. There are plenty of little tips and tricks on the internet to spark creativity, whether it's listening to music, going for a walk, taking a shower, things we've all heard before. And I think sometimes when you get so lost in the creative rut and just so lost in that slump and you just feel so stuck and like your ideas suck and you can't think of anything, the last thing you want to do is try to get that inspiration, right? To try to get that creativity. Because honestly, if you're not feeling it, it's probably not going to work and you're not going to get that spark back. And so all of that being said, sometimes it just takes building that momentum and having patience. And that same avenue is kind of just this idea that sometimes we don't want to admit that there is room to grow and space to learn. And for me, this definitely has hit harder getting back into writing over the last few months. I started to get back into writing a lot last year, but prior to that, outside of stuff that I did during college, I really hadn't consistently written for many, many years, like probably 5 or 6 years. And so when I started writing again, it was not good. Like my writing was like not great, which is obvious, but obviously that feels a little shitty and it makes you kind of get down on yourself, like, wow, am I even good at this? Should I even be doing this? There's so many thoughts that come along with that, and I definitely want to do a whole other video or episode where I talk all about getting back into a passion project, whether it be writing or something else. But I think for me, it's interesting because as a social media strategist who has my own business, there are a lot of areas within my business that I need to use creativity and my skills. And so last year, if you didn't know, I got married and I also renovated and moved into a house. It was a very chaotic period of time for me. All amazing things, wouldn't change it for the world, but it was very busy, very chaotic, and I was basically doing the bare minimum for my work every single day for multiple months. And so when I finally started getting back into working full time later in the year last year, I was almost embarrassed to admit to myself, like, hey, I kind of fell off on this. Like, I'm kind of out of the loop. I mean, anybody who does content or works in social media or marketing knows, like, things are changing every single day. And if you're out of the loop, like you are out of the loop. Like there were so many things that I had missed, so many trends, so many this, so many that, and changes and the way that people were creating. There was so much. And so it really sucked for me to have to admit to myself that I kind of needed to relearn some things. And there's no shame in admitting to yourself that you have some learning to do. Sometimes it does feel embarrassing, but the only person that you are feeling embarrassed by is yourself. So stop judging yourself. Like there's literally nothing wrong with that. I almost laugh at it now because here I am, like almost penalizing myself in my head because I felt like I was out of the loop of the marketing world, but I was away from work. Like I was literally away. Like I was literally vacation days out of office away. So I don't know. Sometimes it's just something that you need to turn on like your logical switch for. Because like I said, the same goes for writing or any creative hobby, passion project that you are pursuing. When you pick that thing back up after a break or even after a rut, it's just not going to feel amazing 9 times out of 10. Like I was literally gagged in the worst way possible when I started writing again. Like my writing was not good. I was like, whoa girl, like have you been lying to yourself this whole time? Like what's going on? Because I just felt like I was terrible at this thing. And lo and behold, months later, I've done some learning. I've watched some videos, taken some courses, read some books, and would you look at that? I feel great about my writing again. And of course, there's always room for improvement. I'm trying to learn new things every single day about the craft of writing. I did go to college for English, so I am very educated on it already, but there is always so much room to grow. And so I think if you're feeling stuck or you're coming out of a rut, reminding yourself that there's literally no shame in learning and educating yourself on this passion, you can't be ashamed of it. You just can't, because it's going to keep you stuck. So yeah, I think, like I said, just if you are feeling stuck, if you're coming out of a rut, if you're starting something new after a long time, reminding yourself that there is just nothing to be ashamed of if you feel like you need to learn a little bit more, if you need to refresh, get educated. It doesn't matter. Like the only person that's ever going to know that is you anyway. There's no shame in watching a couple of YouTube videos, getting educated, and it will just make you so much more confident in whatever it is you're trying to achieve. And in a way, that kind of leads me to my next part of getting out of a creative rut, which is that consumption is most likely ruining your creativity. This goes for everything. Like I said, I'll keep relating all of this to my job as a social media manager and my passion, which is writing, because it's just what's applicable for me. But this can apply for literally everything, even for content creation. And so for something like social media or content creation, let's be real. Let's be real here. We are all living on social media, and the things that you are consuming are literally altering your brain chemistry, not in a good way. And so if you're a content creator or a social media manager and you're scrolling, maybe you're saving ideas, you're like, wow, that's a great idea for me to steal and replicate. That is not the right way to consume. This is something that I think a lot of people are a victim of in the social media world, because you're like, oh, let me get some inspiration by scrolling. But just scrolling and saving things that you would like to replicate because it's like a cool piece of content is not going to spark your creativity. In fact, it is most likely going to completely hinder your ability to be creative. I mean, unfortunately, I cannot scroll through my TikTok For You page without thinking about work, because I have learned to consume content differently with intention. And this might be a little bit more specific to me as somebody who works in social media and is now pursuing content creation. I am constantly looking for things that I like or dislike in the content that I'm consuming, as opposed to saving things that I think are good ideas. Because when you consume something with the intention of just actively learning from it, you are going to find more inspiration and more creativity than you would just by saving something and saying, hey, I'm going to recreate this later. Another example of this is with my writing. When I first started picking up writing again, I was in a big reading slump already. Like even now, like I think I've read 2 books in 2025 and it's March, which is fine. However, if you're gonna be a writer, especially a romance writer, you need to read. You need to read romance, you need to read books about the crafts, you need to read. Like I cannot like stress that enough in the world of writing. Something that I used to say to myself is, what is a writer if not a reader? Because how can you sit down and write a book if you are just not reading books? I don't know. I know there are some authors who like swear by the opposite, and I don't know. I don't get it. I feel like sitting down and reading a romance book makes me want to write my romance book so bad. Like it literally gets me thrilled. And so ultimately, whatever it is that you are creatively stuck with, continue to consume what you are consuming, but learn to be a informed consumer. Especially when it comes to writing, learn to read as a writer. There are a lot of resources on that. I will drop a couple of books below that I really love that talk about that, and a couple of YouTube videos. But essentially, regardless of what it is, if you are consuming content on social media especially, or if you are reading a book, all you really need to do is go through it and consume it as you normally would, but actively take notes on things that you like or dislike about that piece of content, whether it is a piece of writing, a video, a podcast, a TikTok, whatever it is. Just actively consume it. And of course, have your leisure time, like have your leisurely time, have your brain rotting time. Like we all have our time. But if you are specifically sitting down regularly to like scroll for inspiration, next time you sit down to do that, scroll and actively consume. What do you like about that video? Why did you feel the urge to save that and put it into your content ideas folder? What gave you that urge? What did you like about it? What did you not like about it? Maybe you liked the way it was filmed. When it comes to writing, it's the same sort of thing. What do you love about that author? What do you love about that passage, about that sentence? What don't you like about it? Consuming that way and just actively paying attention to what you're consuming with intention is going to help you learn so much about not only your own personal style, but it's also just going to get you excited, and excitement creates creativity. And the last thing that I will talk about as far as getting out of creative rut goes, this is my most honest and real advice, is be patient and have fun. I know it sounds really boring and silly. Like I said, there are so many tips and tricks out there, like go take a walk, go take a shower, put some music on in the car, like do those things and have fun with it. Like really, 9 times out of 10, I will never be able to sit down and force myself to be creative. If I wanted to come up with a book idea right now and I sat down and said to myself, I'm going to come up with a New York Times best-selling book idea, it is not going to happen. Like, it's just not. I just feel like if you are a creative person or you're working on developing that creativity, those ideas and those moments of inspiration will come to you. You have to be patient and wait for them. You cannot create that creativity out of thin air unless you are doing something to foster it, like going for a walk, like letting your mind be clear, like enjoying some music in the car and listening to the sounds, listening to the words in the song. What does it tell you? What ideas does that foster for you? 9 times out of 10, my best ideas constantly come from being in the car or being in the shower, because it's just moments of quiet peace where it's just me and my thoughts. And some of us are scared by that. Some of us are scared by our thoughts, but in those quiet moments where it's just you, you're thinking, and a good song in the background, that is how I foster creativity personally, and that is what will always work for me. However, if you're trying too hard, it probably won't come. If you're sitting down and you're like, I'm gonna go for a drive and come up with a great idea, that may not work. It might, don't get me wrong, it might, but it also may not. So that being said, my biggest piece of advice is to just be patient and continue to build that momentum. Don't stop doing the thing if you're not feeling creative. If I was in a creative rut while I was writing my book, I wouldn't stop writing. Why would I stop writing? Because my muscle of creativity is just going to get weaker and weaker and weaker the more I go without writing. So give yourself some time, let your brain turn off, go on a walk, go listen to some music in the car, do whatever you need to do. And then when you come back to your activity, whether it's writing, creating content, coming up with an idea for something, it will come to you if you allow it. If you just let everything get quiet enough, if you just let that creativity come, it will come to you, but you just can't force it. So again, if you are feeling stuck in a creative rut, you are just like not coming up with any ideas, you can't think, you're lost, you're this, you're that, remind yourself these things. First, creativity is a muscle, and if you continue to build momentum and consistency with whatever it is that you're trying to do, whether it's creating content or writing or whatever, learning an instrument, whatever it is, don't stop doing it. Be patient and allow yourself to have fun with that thing. Because what is your creative hobby if not fun? Why are you doing it if it's not fun? Allow it to be fun. And again, as I mentioned earlier, if you feel like you are stuck, maybe you need to admit to yourself that it's time to learn. Instead of forcing yourself to do that thing, step back and say, hey, I'm gonna watch a video about this topic. I'm gonna learn a little bit more about this thing. It's okay. It's okay if you need to learn a little bit more about that thing. If you feel a little bit uneducated or like you're missing a piece of something, take a moment to learn. And finally, like I said, the world that we live in, you are constantly consuming, so try to consume with intention. Scroll on TikTok with intention, scroll on Reels with intention, read a book with intention. Whatever it is, try to actively note what you like and dislike about the things that you're feeling pulled to. I know a lot of that advice might sound a little bit cheesy, but I promise you it is true. As you guys know, I'm a social media manager, I'm writing my book, I've had a lot of other creative hobbies and passions in the past. I promise that I do know what I'm talking about, and if you are stuck in a creative rut, that is what I would recommend that you do. If this was helpful, I would love if you could leave a comment below and like this video. Rate the podcast on Spotify and subscribe if you haven't already. It would mean the absolute world to this small creator. I definitely have a lot more things to say about this topic, so if you're interested, let me know and I can definitely make a second part to this episode. But for now, that will be everything. Thank you guys so much for watching or listening wherever you are. It means the world to me, and I will see you next week for another episode of Annotations.